Hey, so I decided that I was going to jump on here and kind of multitask because it's late. Excuse me, it's like super, super late. Um, I know this light is like not really working out really well, but we're going to ignore that, okay? Um, so it's really late and I'm still trying to get some work done, so I figured if I multitask, then it'll kind of keep me focused. All right. So, I was having a conversation earlier today with someone, and I was sharing how I had listened to my mentor, or one of my mentors, and in the midst of this conversation, he was sharing how there was a conversation he had with someone else, and because of a work well done with this individual who was a great person. Um, he went to go and compliment this person. This person was like, it was all God, it was all Jesus, or something to that effect. And my mentor said that this great person, that he knows loves the Lord, um, without a doubt. This was his response, and he said to him, he said, well, he didn't say to him, he said, it was basically, he kind of shared like about false humility. And so what he told us was like, it was really false humility. And I'm sitting there like, false humility? Like, what do you mean false humility? It's not the way I've heard false humility before, right? Um, and so he went on to explain how with this false humility, and sorry, I'm still, like I said, I'm still working, right? So with this false humility, the person thought it was so humble of him to not take credit for the work that he did. And the truth of the matter is that he did the work, but in a way of being humble, it was a way of giving every bit of credit to God. And so my mentor was saying, how he shared with a person, well, did God reach down and push the buttons? Did he turn the knobs? Is that what he did? And you gotta think, like, I'm sitting here listening, like, okay, I'm picking this up. I think I'm a little concerned about this too, but the way that this is going. And so, he said, you're the one, you're the one that actually reached down, pushed the buttons, turned the knobs, and did this work. And it wasn't God who did it, so take the compliment. And I was like, dang, do I do that? I think I do that. Yeah, that's not cool. Wake up call. Because the truth is like, excuse me, the truth is like, kind of like how I was like raised, so to speak. And not like at home, but in some aspects of the church that I was in, and a couple of the churches I was in, it was this way in which humility was taught. And it was taught in such a way that you could never, you really don't take credit for anything that you do. And if you really think about it, if you're unable to take a compliment for work well done, then when you start looking at confidence, then how do you start to pull yourself up in times of trouble. Because, when the chips are down, you can be crying out, Lord, Lord. And God is like, I already gave you everything you needed. What are you doing? And you're having a hard time with that because you're waiting on God to do something. And he's like, I already gave you everything. I gave you everything you needed. Like, use what you have. But if you are never able to take credit for anything that you've ever done, that means you're never able to truly recognize your actual achievements. You're never able to recognize things that you have actually accomplished. Because see, the more that we accomplish things, right, even as we start out with something small, right, for every small accomplishment, we start building confidence in our ability to do more. And so we do something small, but confidence builds, right? We see the fruit of our labor. Confidence builds. And then we do something greater, and then confidence builds. And we do something greater, and confidence builds. But every time we do something, and then there's some fruit of that, we feel more confident, and therefore we're willing to take greater leaps of faith. We're willing to step out further than the last time. We might take that baby step the first time and be like, I know a little bit of something, but I'm not really sure if this is going to work. But if I'm pushed a little bit, I'll take a baby step. But wait a minute, now that I got this baby step and I can see that I can stand up and I can walk a little bit, or at least I can stand up, then maybe I might step out. Whoa, I stepped out. And since I stepped out, this felt good. Maybe I could take another step. And my last step is greater than, my next step is greater than my last step. And so it just continues to go on and on. And so after a while, it's not just a step, but it begins to become a run, right? A jog, a run, and then a sprint. And then after a while, who knows? You might run actually a marathon. You might be able to go a long, long time. But it's very difficult to get there if you're not able to acknowledge the work that you have done. It's false humility if we're not able to do so. Now, I'll be honest, for me, I personally have gone through kind of like this ebb and flow of this, right? Growing up, that's why I said it didn't start in my home, because growing up, I was trained as an athlete, right? And I did really well in school. And so that wasn't a problem. I was praised for what I did, but more importantly, my parents kind of taught me like, well, I can be proud of you, but be proud of yourself. And so I was never made to feel as if I was not being humble about what I know. It was always, the challenge of stepping out to do greater. And, when I would do something, it was now setting the bar higher to do something else. And so that's how I was raised at home. Throughout the years, some of that kind of changed. I went into the military, and again, it was like, okay, I'm in a new space. I have to learn some new things. And so it was like, ooh, can I do this? Can I not do this? We're part of a team. And if we're part of a team, maybe it's supposed to be all a team effort. But again, having good mentors, having good leaders, it was, yeah, you're a part of the team, but you also have to remember that even though you're part of a team, there is work that you have done as an individual. The entire team did not pull the same amount of weight. So recognize your your input, recognize what you've done, recognize what you have brought to the table, and then be proud of your accomplishments, be proud of your achievements. Like, don't water it down. In fact, if you do continue watering it down, then you're definitely going to miss new opportunities, because especially when you're looking at where I was in the Air Force, if you don't share what you've done, if you don't share the things that you have accomplished, especially when you're outside the view of your supervisors, they won't know. So you got to tell somebody what you're doing. So it wasn't about boasting. It was about, hey, I'm sharing, because if I don't share, then I'll miss opportunities. But I will tell you that for me, once I became older and was involved differently in the church than I was when I was younger, this changed. Because, I'll say, for instance, like here in Arizona, I found a new church home. And in this way, in this time frame, I was, like I said, I was older. I had a lot more experience underneath my belt, experience as a person, experience as a leader. And church wasn't new for me, although I was new to the church. Well, this particular church. But coming in as someone who is new, we'll say new to you, then it was pretty much the expectation to kind of water down. Now, understand, I'm never going to bash the church. Listen, that's not what we're doing here. I'm just sharing my experience. All right. So, and it's going to make sense, as we get through this. But in this particular instance, it was, there are things that, instead of getting to know me as much as I was learning the establishment in which I was in, the organization that I was in, it wasn't the same type of mutual building relationship, right? So on their end, it's like you get to know them, you get to know what they're doing, you get to know what they're about, you get to know their history, you get to know the vision, right? And then you get to know like how you are going to be a part of it. The only challenge is that in the midst of building that relationship, it's very much so one-sided, because where is my history? Because in understanding my history and who I am, and why God has sent me to be a part of the body, then how can we know how I'm supposed to also contribute to the body? And so in each of us, God gives gifts, talents, and abilities. And sometimes, depending on who you are, He will help to develop those gifts, talents, and abilities in different places and in different spaces. And it may not be where you just landed, but we'll never get to know what's available to us if we're not getting to know who God sent to us. You have the head that is there, and the head is concerned about what's happening within the body. How, level of complacency and lack of leadership and lack of initiative and all these other things that, that are happening. But yet you have individuals that come in and say, hey, so I would like to work. I would like to do these things because I've been active. I've been very active in ministry. I've been very active in God's house. And this part of me being active helps me to continue to grow, helps me to continue to grow uh, emotionally, spiritually. It grows in my spiritual maturity. But if there is the absence of that, then we present challenges. And in this challenge, it was almost as if, well, you know, I hate to say it this way, but almost like a gag order, right? So the gag order is like, well, you don't get to just come in and say what you know how to do. And if you do say all these things that you know how to do, well, do you really? So it's kind of question, like, do you really know all this stuff that you're saying? Because that can't be true, because you're in the military, or you're a woman, or you're a single mother. So all these kind of stigmas or these biases that they have kind of prevents the ability to get to know me. And so therefore we start backing off. Over time, kind of sitting back and just kind of watering down and just saying, to myself, well, like, okay, well, this doesn't work and I'm not doing this, and, not in a negative way, but it's really the watering down and then kind of taking on like, well, no, God just showed me how to do it, or God just told me to do it, or, someone gives you a compliment. It's like, oh, well, yay, God, right? And not to ever take anything away from God. Again, don't misconstrue my words. But you learn not to take credit for stuff, because it's almost as if in their eyes you're boasting and bragging. And the truth is, I was never boasting and bragging. I just walked in confident. And there is a difference between being confident and being arrogant. There is a major difference between being confident and being arrogant. All right, for some of you that may have a little bit of a challenge with the church thing, it's kind of the same thing in the workplace, right? So for those of you who may go to a workplace, and especially for women of color, like let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there for women of color. You go to a place, and as a woman of color, people are shocked and amazed at what you know. And so therefore, when you take a compliment, it's almost like you're just like, oh, okay, things, or you're trying really hard to be a team player because you don't want to be seen as prideful, arrogant, aggressive, overly assertive. And the truth of the matter is that your confidence should not be a problem for people. And if it is, it's really just their problem. But we shouldn't have to keep watering ourselves down because of what we know. I did a podcast today, and, we've been talking about confidence. And it's like, the more you do know, actually know, the more confident you become. So much so that if you're standing toe to toe with someone who thinks that they're who thinks that they're knowledgeable about something, and you realize that they're not, you can stand toe to toe with them in their actual ignorance and let them know you're not being argumentative, you're not being disrespectful, you're not being dishonorable, but you are standing up for what is right and what is wrong. That's confidence. It's not narcissistic. It's kind of my thoughts. But we can have some biblical truth to kind of back up this whole, like, humility thing. So I sat with it and I prayed about it. And so I went to the scripture. We went to the scripture to deal with this whole issue of false humility and what the difference between false humility and actual humility. And so it really goes back to, you can look at James. Let's look at James 4 as a reference. James 4. Now, the first scripture I looked at was James 4 and 10. Okay. So I'm going to read James 4 and 10 for you. And this is out of the Amplified version. I don't know, a lot of you guys like the KJV, and that's fine. I have nothing against the KJV, but I'm not reading it tonight. This is a choice we're reading out of. It's going to help bring some context to this. James 4 and 10 says, humble yourselves. And so in the Amplified version, there are things that are in parentheses that kind of help us with understanding what this means, okay? It says, humble yourselves, feeling very insignificant in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. He will lift you up and make your lives significant. So exalt is he will lift you up and make your lives significant. And then humble in this aspect means feeling very insignificant. All right. Now, because we have a habit of what I call cherry picking scripture, we tend to take something and it's like, okay, let me pick this cherry off the tree, and I'm just going to eat this one, and that's the only one I'm going to eat. And then because that's the one I ate and it was good to me, I'm going to just go around, I'm going to just spit that pit out everywhere I go. Right? And so that's the only thing that we recite. We don't look at before it. We don't look at after it. We don't look at around it. We don't look at the passage of scripture prior to it. We don't look at the passage of scripture afterwards. We don't look at historical context. We don't look at any of that. We just cherry pick it. And because we cherry pick it, then we use it however we want to use it, whenever we want to use it. And so therefore we cannot practically apply it the way we should, or the best way we could. Now, so some people have different ways of focusing on theology, right? So remember, I studied theology, but for me, since my specialty or the emphasis of me studying theology was more of Christian ethics, then I like to go in and teach more practical theology. And that's basically how we're applying, right? The applicable, how we're applying this word, right? So it's kind of taking different other different areas of theology and kind of practically applying it. All right. So looking at historical as well. So speaking of historical, let's kind of understand what was happening in the text. So in this particular text, what's happening is you have a chapter that is focusing totally on the causes of contention that the people were supposed to watch for. The causes of contention and how to watch out for them. All right. Now, the people were involved were the Christian Jews, and the one that was addressing them was the apostle. All right. So in this case, James is saying, listen, let's talk about relationships, right? Because a lot of what we're talking about here in James has a lot to do with relationships. We're talking about relationships amongst the people. We're talking relationships amongst the families, amongst the body. So it's all type of relationships. How we get along. As they used to say back in the 80s, let's be the get along gang. How are we doing this? Well, we have the word to help us to how to build these healthy relationships. But in this case, the foundation that we get is, hey, these folks out here wilding out. And what they're doing is they're back here causing war, contention, and strife amongst themselves and others. And they're using it, they're using the pretense of we'll say God and country as the way to kind of like start all these wars. Well, the way they use God and country, the way I say God and country, right? The way they would do it is like saying, okay, well, God, they're trying to defend God's honor, right? So it's honoring God in what they do, and country meaning the zeal for their country. But again, it's a pretense. It's definitely a pretense. But what's really happening in this text, and what's really happening during this time with these people, is that this pretense is really the mask for what's happening. And what's underneath the mask is everyone else's prevailing lust. It's their prevailing lust. And that is what James is constantly dealing with and constantly talking about throughout the text. And what he's trying to tell them in this in this passage is, it's like, listen, what you need to do is you need to step away and abandon the friendships of the world, the friendships of this world, so that you can submit yourselves entirely to God. So get rid of all of that. Forget about, all the worldly stuff. Forget about, placing this, great value upon worldly pleasures and friendships are going to cause, what's considered at this time shameful division. Now, why is it shameful division and strife? Again, it's because their actions are basically masked by their prevailing lusts. And so their prevailing lusts are pride, malice, covetousness, ambition, and revenge. So as much as we're saying, or they're saying, oh, it's about God, we're going to honor God, and we got to stand up for God, and this is about our country, it's really about self. It's about things that they want, that they desire. It's about their own ambitions. It's about their revenge. It's about covetousness, and then malice and pride, right? It's about all these things that have absolutely nothing to do with God. Want to fact check it? Go back to the text before. And the text before, the apostle is actually kind of like rebuking them. And he's like, listen, your lust spoil prayers. This is in 4. He says, your lust spoil prayers and make them an abomination to God whenever you send them up. What? My prayers is an abomination to God. Why come my prayers are abomination to God? Because your prayers stink. Your filthy prayers that you sending up has nothing to do with God. They have everything to do with your lust, fulfilling your lust. That's basically what he's saying. Just saying it in my Shawanda way, help him make the connection. All right. He also says in the verse prior to that, in 3, you ask and receive not, because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lust. So now when you look at, okay, well, how come I'm not receiving the things that I need to receive? Is because you're asking with the wrong motive and motivation. And the motive and motivation has to do with the wrong heart posture, obviously, because it's about you're lusting after things that you should not be lusting after, that have absolutely nothing to do with God, and it's turning God off. For example, you pray for the success against your enemy. God, make me the head of my enemy. What? Why you need to be the head of your enemy? You're not really concerned about that right now. How is that helping you right now? How is that helping anybody right now? And how is that helping anybody really connect to God? What is that really all about? Why is that driving you? Is that driving you because you're really tired of people talking about you? Are you tired of, how you're approached? Are you tired of how people are going to see you? Like what is the issue? And whatever that issue is making you kind of stand out in this way. Make me the head of my enemy. Make me do this. Make me do that. God is not concerned about any of that. He's not concerned about any of that. And so because we think this way and we think that, that God is going to keep, answering these vengeful prayers, he's not. He's not. We're wondering why things ain't working out for us, right? So, but that's what's happening here in the text, right? Now, the goal here is to turn the heart, and to turn the heart to say, you're being prideful. You're too haughty. And if you're super haughty, you need to come down some. You're too high, you need to get low. So today we're saying, well, you just need to be humble, meaning I need to stand over you so you can be humble. That's not it. You need to be humble, meaning you don't get to take credit for everything, or take credit for anything. That's not it. It's really looking at humility of, let's not be so haughty that what we're doing is lustful. What we're doing is in the wrong heart posture, that what we're doing is in the wrong motive and motivation. Because if it is, and you're sitting up here, you got to come down. You need to come down to a lower place, because you're sitting way too high. You need to be humble. That's how we should be using the humility. Because here, we have the text to kind of help guide us. And the text is to help keep us grounded. And grounded meaning not losing confidence, not staying in a low place to where you can't take credit for something that you've done. It's so that you don't get too full of yourself. Because what is God going to do with that? He can't do nothing with that. You too full of yourself. That's not working. And not only can you be too full of yourself to where God, if you're a part of a body, God can't use you then. And if you're a leader, what is God going to do with you then? You can't listen. You can't listen to people in the body. There's no checks and balances no more. You are the leader. God has you as the leader. But, listen, you ain't the only one hearing from God. We need to check that spirit in the church. It's a problem with that. And I say that as a leader. And I say that as a leader that comes out of even another type of organization where there is checks and balances. There's always checks and balances. There's always checks and balances. It keeps us from walking around and being little gods. Because when we start getting to a place where we can't listen, and we think we're the only one that can hear, and we think we're the only ones that can see, and we think we're the only ones who is knowledgeable, and we think we're the only ones that can do, and we think we're the only ones, we are starting to become little gods. And if we really start checking the ego, and I say it again, this as a leader, and we start checking the ego, we start realizing, whoa, wait a minute. The problem is we've gotten a little haughty. And part of it has to do with self-ambition, has to do with pride, has to do with covetousness. It has to do with a lot of things that have nothing to do with God. Because listen, we all can be, speaking as a leader, we can be over a ministry. And we understand that God has placed us over a ministry. And that is our responsibility. But that thing can become an idol. And it can become an idol quick. And we got to be careful. We got to be careful. We got to be so careful that, sometimes we're trying so hard to hold on. We're trying so hard to build. We're trying so hard to grow. We're trying so hard to do all of these things that we've made ministry an idol. And ministry can't be an idol, because if ministry is an idol, God can't do nothing with that. And that's why we need humility. That's why we need humility. So yeah. Look. So I teach substitute teaching, right? Well, teach substitute teaching, that makes no sense. I substitute teach. There we go. I substitute teach occasionally. And I go to schools where, for the most part, I try to stick with the littles. And the littles for me, because I'm much older now, right? I've realized I call them all littles and all little kids now. But for me, it's like, for the most part, 4th grade and down. Ooh, after 4th grade, it gets a little iffy. But I really try to stick with 4th grade and down. But when we go, and by down, meaning like from 1st to 4th grade, I can't do kinder. It's kind of out of my lane. Nonetheless, when I'm in the schools, they have a system where they have a way of trying to teach accountability. And when I go, I do my part to try to maintain that as well. Sometimes I may take a little step further, because I'd like to really try to connect with the kids as best as I can, the way I can. And but the thing that they do is, the children have consequences for things that they do or do not do. For instance, if, you're not meeting certain expectations or what have you, then, you have your redirections. And after so many redirections, then you might lose a privilege. That's part of your consequence, right? Well, one of the privilege might be, hey, you can't go out for recess, or you might lose time during recess. And for me, when a student loses time for recess, we'll probably have a conversation and say, well, why did you choose? Why did you choose to continue down the route where you would have to take this consequence, rather than changing your behavior or changing your actions so that you can receive your reward? And so that becomes part of the teaching moment, right? Where we kind of get into that. So I bring this up because, when we think about work, school, home, church, anywhere in our life, when it comes to something negative, without hesitation, there's accountability. We must take accountability for something that we did. We must own it. Excuse me. We must own what we did or did not do when it comes to something negative. But Why can't we do the same thing when it comes to something positive? It is the most baffling thing to me. You are taught, if you don't do something, then this shall happen. Think about in certain aspects of church when you're talking doctrine, religion, not relationship, religion. And it's, if you don't do this, then this happens. If you don't do this, this happens. If you don't do this, this happens, right? At work, if you don't do this, this happens. If you don't do this, this happens, meaning you can get fired. At school, if you don't do something, something happens. You miss a grade, you miss a reward or whatever, right? At home, you don't do something, something happens. In your personal life, you don't do something, something happens. There's a consequence. You might lose your car, you get in an accident, lights get turned, I don't know, whatever that is, right? But in the midst of all of that, when it does happen, you're supposed to take accountability for that. Well, you realize this is what you did, right? Yes. Okay, well then don't do it again. Okay. Because it helps you learn, helps you grow. Don't do it again. Why is that the only growth that we're supposed to have? We only grow from negative? We don't grow from positive? Since when? Think about that for a minute. Because on the flip side of that, what you have is, hey, you did something good today. Oh, wow, thanks. Confidence, growth. Well, you know what? I saw that you did this one thing, so I would like to give you something greater to do. Oh, thanks. I'm not sure if I could do it. I think you can. Because if you did this one, I have confidence in you. You can do the next one. And it helps you to continue to build your confidence. More and more, more and more, just like we talked at the beginning. You go from a crawl to a stand, to a walk, to another step, so on and so forth. Why is that not allowed to happen? Why, if you are approached in that aspect, it becomes, oh, it was just God. Well, guess what? I guess God's supposed to get that next opportunity too. And then you wind up walking around trying to figure out how come stuff ain't working for you. Well, because you gave all the credit to God. And God was like, well, listen, I tried to open this door and opportunity to you, and you just sat around thinking, you were, Harriet Humble, or Humble Harriet, or Humble Harold. But you wasn't. Because your name is Paul. Your name is Karen. Took on a false identity with your false humility. It's not working for you. And therefore you miss what God had for you and all your fakeness. That ain't it. Oh, it was a team effort. No, good daggone well it wasn't a team effort. You were the leader of that team. And you know what you did. And you know that half them jokers on that team didn't do nothing. And you know they didn't pull their weight. So why you sit up there covering from? It does not make you that much more of a greater person. You're missing opportunities. Speak up. You don't have to be arrogant, but you can speak up. And you don't have to water stuff down to make somebody else feel better. You don't have to water yourself down because someone else is about to get left behind. That don't work either. But your confidence should be able to build and grow. That's what should happen. And then you should be able to grow and move on to new opportunities, more and more. Because if God does bless you with something, yes, you give him thanks for the new opportunities that continue to come your way. Because guess what? He gave you something to work with. He gave you something to work with. He was like, here, Here's your gift. Here's a talent. Here's a skill. And the way you honor him with that is to use it. The way you honor him with that is to continue to develop it. The way you honor him with that is to continue to grow. Not walk around in false humility. The way you honor him with that is to also stay grounded, never getting fat-headed, becoming your own little God. And that's why you need the balance.